Hi, my name is Natalie Gregg, and this is the Natalie Gregg Law Podcast. And I am super excited to have our guest today, Dr. Blake Mitchell. And Dr. Mitchell has been practicing since 2001 and has an extensive background in and out of the courtroom as a forensic psychologist and a counselor. And he's here to talk to us about how our clients and become involved in litigation and family law, divorce, child custody, modification, and how they get to meet him and how he becomes involved in their lives, and to shed some light on what you can do and what you can avoid in dealing with someone in this role. So welcome, Dr.
Absolutely.
Mitchell.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Good to be here.
So, Dr. Mitchell, you're in private practice, right?
Yes, ma'am. Been in private practice here in Texas since 2006, 18 years almost. Kind of crazy.
It is crazy. And where is your office located?
I have just one office up in Frisco. We're pretty close to the Star on the east side of the tollway up in Frisco.
And do you tend to testify in many different jurisdictions?
I do. We cover, obviously, we're in Collin County, so we get a lot of Collin County cases. Denton County's right there, Dallas County, but certainly we'll travel throughout the Metroplex and even other parts of the state from time to time.
So in kind of picking your brain to figure out how we can help our clients and potentially other lawyers understand what your role is, could you explain how you become in the process, a part of the process in litigation and family law cases?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a number of ways that I can be involved. Probably the most common for me is through a court order or some kind of mutual agreement. Usually it's after a dispute. Maybe you've already been to a temporary orders hearing. There's a dispute about someone's psychological functioning or what's best for the kids, something like that. The judge then recommends, or the attorneys recommend, a psychological evaluation or child custody evaluation. Somehow they agree to me doing those evaluations, and then I'm ordered by the court to do evaluations. So via court order is probably the most common for me. Then there's also times where attorneys will call me and ask me to work just for an attorney, maybe see their party, maybe see their litigant.
So would you consider that to be in a consulting role, or is that sometimes also a treating role of what you would call a patient?
So it can be both. So one is, yes, I can consult, meaning I can interview a patient, I can do a quick psychological evaluation and give you as the attorney some insight into that person's psychological functioning. I can treat that person and give that person give you the insight into their psychological functioning. Or I can just kind of consult. I can review documents. I can, talk about maybe previous psychiatric diagnoses that have occurred with the individual that you're seeing, or maybe even the other party. So I can actually function in quite a number of different roles, but that's more on the, I say, retained expert or the expert side versus the court order side.
And when you're wearing these hats, is it important that your role is defined?
Always. Probably the number one thing that I will do before I start any process with attorneys and with litigants is define exactly what it is that I'm going to be doing. Because if it's court ordered, I need to make sure everybody understands that when you talk to me, it's not confidential, it's not private, it's not off the record. And a lot of litigants need to understand that I'm not their attorney. I will certainly be asked to disclose just about everything that's being told to me. I will say, even if I'm like a retained expert and then asked to do a psychological evaluation, I certainly will warn them that it's possible that this could go to court, and therefore don't assume this is private, confidential, off the record. So defining my role from the very beginning, defining the ramifications of that role from the very beginning is to me, step number one before we even get into why are you hanging out with me? Why are you spending time with me? Why are you going through this evaluation? What have you? They really have to know and then be comfortable with my role and then their part in this role in what I'm going to be doing with them and maybe for them.
And so one of the things that you just told me about was sometimes you'll be asked to do a psychological evaluation. Sometimes can those be pre-litigation or outside of the orders, just to say, to assess by an attorney or otherwise, whether there is truly possibly a diagnosis that we need to be aware of prior to walking into that courtroom and rolling the dice?
That's absolutely the case. Yes, I know, and you've called me and other attorneys have called me, and where I do speak with litigants, maybe even prior to first temporary orders, just so you as an attorney have an idea of what you're going up against. Maybe there's all kinds of accusations that are being made against your client. It may or may not be true. And so hopefully my role in doing kind of an independent psychological evaluation, which is kind of what you're referring to, you can have a better idea of whether these accusations maybe hold water or not.
And just because we have a temporary restraining order or an emergency affidavit that says, mom or dad is suicidal, they're crazy, they drink too much, they take out, pills, does that sometimes merit the need to come and rebut those crazy allegations?
What I would defer to as attorneys, I always defer to my attorney friends. Yes, they can be either. So my role can be sometimes to refute them, maybe even explain them from time to time. Maybe the individual was going through postpartum issues, and maybe that's what actually led to some of these behaviors that people would define as, crazy. Where we can come up with good explanations that. And again, the courts in our area here, I think, are extremely savvy to mental health and are extremely accepting and open to that life is a struggle from time to time. And it leads to things that we probably would take back if we could. And it doesn't necessarily even then translate into our parenting. So my role can be multifaceted, even before litigation begins, helping you, helping the court, helping litigants, helping children.
Sure. You mentioned one of the things that you perform as a forensic is child custody evaluation. So in that role, are you in neutral?
Right. So always a child custody evaluation, it is a court-appointed process.
Okay.
So therefore, I am absolutely a neutral person. Before I can even be appointed, all the attorneys have to go through kind of the process with me that says, hey, Blake, you've never met these people. You haven't seen mom in counseling, or you don't know mom as part of the school that your kids go to, things like that. So even before I'm appointed, we have to go through a process to make sure there's no conflict of interest. There's no inherent bias that I would even come into the process. The objective is to make sure that the custody evaluator is as neutral as absolutely possible going into the process.
And as a neutral, sometimes do you perform testing?
Yes. So again, we can do. I do testing and custody evaluations. Not everybody does testing and custody evaluations. I do. And then psychological evaluations are the same way. There are times where not only am I asked to do a custody evaluation, but I may be asked to do an independent psychological evaluation of an individual. In that case, I would do testing as well.
So for a client out there right now who's saying, okay, I just got an order that I have to go see, Dr. Blake Mitchell or fill in the blank with a PhD to do a child custody evaluation, how can they prepare, and what are the basic steps in that evaluation?
That's a good question. There's not a lot of prep I don't think people can do, really. I always say relax. I try to be kind. I try to be nice in this process. I understand that people, when they're coming to me, certainly in the context of divorce or child modification litigation, this is some of the worst times of their life. And so I assure you, I will work to make you comfortable. I'll work to make you relaxed. I will try to make it as pleasant as possible, knowing it's not a pleasant process, but I will try to do that as much as possible. So I would just say, just relax as best you can.
And what would you advise that they do regarding their children? Because a lot of my clients will say, I'm really nervous. I don't know what my kids are going to say. I don't know what they're going to find.
And so if it's a psych eval, I won't talk to the kids.
Okay.
Really. I will only talk to the parents if it's like a psychological evaluation. If it's a custody evaluation, that is something that I will address with the parents along the process. For me, a custody evaluation, I'm going to meet with the parents for a handful of weeks before we introduce the children at all.
Okay.
And usually how I ask the parents to introduce it to the children is, hey, this is a friend of mom and dad. This is somebody who's helping mom and dad. We're having a tough time in our family. And they've probably already talked to their kids about separation, divorce, something like that. And so usually I just have them say, you're going to go hang out with this dude, in my vernacular, of course, sorry. You're going to hang out with this guy. You're probably going to throw the football or maybe, shoot some Nerf hoops, or you're just going to hang out and relax. And he's just going to ask you about your life. He's going to help me and your dad or me and your mom figure out what's best for you. So I try to, guide them into helping their kids just feel comfortable. And again, I'm not going to grill them. I'm literally just going to kind of hang out with them and hopefully have a little fun.
Good. Well, so step 1 is you get appointed.
Yes.
Step 2 is you do the intake process with the clients.
Yes.
And you said that could take several weeks at times?
So it can. So usually what I say is I try to do 2-hour blocks. And usually for a psych eval and a custody eval, it's either 2 or 3 2-hour blocks of time at the very beginning. And what I'm trying to get from this initial time is, first of all, who are you? Where you come from? Where were you born? Your mom, your dad, your brothers, sisters, just kind of your life. How'd you get here? So that'll be a part of our process. And then the second piece will be, why are you guys hanging out with me? Why, how did this devolve to in such a manner that you are hanging out with me? And I give you the opportunity to talk about, the other party, and how the other party contributed to this. I give you the opportunity to tell on yourself a little bit. What are some of the things that you did that may have contributed to some of this? And then what I do also in that process is I will then come back and I will say, well, Dad told me these stories. They're a little bit different maybe than what you told me. Can you help me, marry the difference between these two stories? And I'll do the same with Dad as well. And so my first probably 4 to 6 hours with parents is really spent getting to know you, getting to know your story, but then also starting the process of these stories are different. Help me understand just a little bit.
And would it probably be fair to say 100% of the cases have 2 different sides of a story?
It does vary. I mean, I would say it does vary from time to time. Most of the time, yes. Okay. Most of the time, we tend to accentuate the good things that we did and maybe accentuate the bad things the other side did. And then we're both kind of doing that little dance back and forth. And hopefully, I would say hopefully most of us can at some point say, I probably should have done X a little bit different, or I should have done Y a little bit different. And so, yes, most of the time they're quite disparate. But, from time to time, they do okay. We'll see. And
so in doing those reports, you mentioned that you do some testing sometimes.
Yes.
And actually, do you do that in most of your cases?
I do it in, I would say all. I'm probably not an all or nothing guy, but I would say yes, in pretty much all of my cases, I do psychological testing, standardized psychological testing, yes.
And just for the layperson out there, could you explain to them what that testing encompasses, and kind of we have a lot of fancy words, but what are the markers and what are the things that stand out as red flags in parenting and self-awareness in parenting?
Okay. So with the testing, there are really just a whole bunch of usually true false questions. There's 2 different tests that I give. One is just true false. The other has 4 false, slightly true, mainly true, very true. But it's a whole bunch of statements, and you just respond true or mostly true, false, false or not usually true, your own opinion of yourself. And we compare your responses to others also undergoing child custody evaluation. So I'm not going to compare your results to somebody who really is at an inpatient facility or something. Obviously, your life circumstances are a little bit different. So we certainly have to interpret testing within the context of the circumstance that brings you to my office. For me, so one of the questions I'm asked a lot is, can you fake testing? One thing that's embedded in tests is what's called response style scales. How did the person approach the test? In child custody litigation, of course, there's this idea that I want to present myself well. I don't have really many issues at all. I'm actually doing okay. There's nothing to see here. There are scales in the MMPI and the PAI that I use that are positive impression management scales. So I can tell if you're being somewhat defensive or resistant to acknowledging personal shortcomings, things like that. Some of that is expected. I like to see, and what's probably a little bit better, is if I can see individuals who are willing to acknowledge, again, I wasn't totally perfect in this whole process. I made some mistakes. I have some issues from time to time, and I'm willing to discuss them. I'm open about them, and therefore I'm willing to address them. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's going to make us better parents, because we all make mistakes as parents. And one of our biggest tasks to me as a parent is to admit my mistakes, change my behavior, and do a little bit different. And so even in the testing, we're going to see those kinds of responses. And so if you're super, super, super defensive and you have done no wrong, that's going to be a pretty significant red flag for me.
So it sounds like you really value self-awareness and self-reflection in a patient or a client. 100%.
And again, I mean, as a parent, I mean, goodness, we all of us have been parents. We understand if we need to understand what we do wrong, just be a parent for 10 minutes, because we're told pretty regularly what we don't do well. As a parent, I think part of our task is to self-reflect and go, you know what, you're right. From time to time, I didn't do that well. I need to do better next time. But there are times where I say, no, I was right. You need to follow my rules and follow my guidance. But there are a lot of times where I need to be able to say, no, I probably should have done a little bit different there. And so in an evaluation process, can you do that with me? That speaks a lot to how you can be with your children. And again, like I said, the courts even in this area are not looking for perfect parents. There's no such thing. We're looking for parents who can acknowledge I haven't done great, but I am really working to be better tomorrow for my kids.
So people are basically a work in progress, would you say?
I think that's, whether we're going through litigation or we're not going through litigation, that's absolutely the case. Hopefully we always have that mind's eye that we are working to improve ourselves and be a little bit better. And I always say it's not even for our own sake so much as it is for the sake of the next generation, our kids, and then our kids can learn then to have that mindset, and then they can pass that on to their kids. So that, to me, that's my hope for everybody.
So when you go through between the initial interview, family of origin stuff, you also interview sometimes collaterals, which are friends, colleagues, people who are close to that person.
Absolutely. So yeah, continuing the process for a custody eval, I will interview the kids. So that's usually after I get to know the situations when I bring in the kids and I get to hang out. To me, it's hanging out. We're just hanging out, having a good time with the kids. But then, yes, I do ask for collateral information, and I will ask for collateral information from the attorneys. Like, you guys can provide me depositions or hearing transcripts or whatever, I know you guys do
All
all
the
kinds of,
boring
all
stuff.
you guys do random stuff. I have no idea. But I do like interrogatories.
I'm sorry for that.
I'm sure I'm not using the right terms, but I try to. So I'll take in all those kinds
Sure.
of pieces of information, but then I'll also take in text messages, between the parties. As we know, they can be quite indicative of one's psychological functioning. How do I interact with my my partner, even 2 years, 3 years before litigation? How was I interacting with my partner? Emails, of course, email exchanges back and forth. I will get social media stuff
Sure.
pretty regularly. What do you post? What do you like? People post what they're doing, and sometimes what you're doing is not conducive to outstanding parenting from time to time. So I get that kind of collateral material as well. And then I will ask to talk to people. I will actually physically call people out in the real world that know these guys. And they can be certainly therapists, psychiatrists, treating physicians from time to time. But I may also want to chat with a neighbor. I may want to chat with the grandparents, because the grandparents are very involved in childcare. Soccer coaches, people that just kind of know these guys outside of our offices.
Has it ever happened to you that you've interviewed a collateral and they had something completely different to say than what was reported by the parties?
I'm sure it's happened. I will say 9 times out of 10, I call collaterals closer to the end of my process.
Okay.
And so for me, 9 times out of 10, the collaterals are basically reiterating things that I've already seen, heard, and kind of like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I will say probably the best. Sometimes I will say sometimes grandparents are the best collateral calls for me, because there's the idea that my mom is always going to be on my side.
Yeah.
But then there's a lot of times where, somebody may call my mom and be like, he's such a knucklehead. I can't believe that guy. He just needs to, knock it off or whatever. And so sometimes, moms, grandparents can really be informative and give me a little bit more information than I was expecting, and be really, really, really helpful to me. But no, I would say most of the time the collaterals I get are pretty what I expect.
Okay. So once you've completed all the data gathering, I guess, about how long, if you had to average it, and I know that's a little tough, if you had to average it, about how long does that take you?
The average is, if I just could go straight forward, 4 to 6 months just to gather the information. As you know, there's hearings, people go on vacations, there's times where people just drop off. I'll email, I'll call, and, I just won't hear from anybody for a month or two. And so that sometimes can extend the process. But if we really hit the ground running and take off in a pretty straight line, 4 to 6 months of just gathering information.
And so at the end of that gathering of information, what is what you call your work product? What do you call that?
So it's, I guess, the child custody evaluation. It's the report that's produced at the end of the process. Now, if we're doing it right, and usually it's me and my office staff and
Sure.
Folks that help me write these reports, because that's the hardest part for me, is just putting it on paper
Right.
and actually writing it all up. It usually ends up, I've gotten it to 40, 50-page reports. I feel like I do need to summarize just about everything that's talked to me about. I've tried to keep it a little bit shorter from time to time, because you guys don't have the time to read 100-page reports. The court certainly doesn't have time to read 100-page reports. So if I can do what I can to summarize and still being fair to the data, that's kind of the balance that I hope to maintain, is something that's readable, but then it's fair as well. But usually a 50-page report or so, and when I'm done, sign it off and review it 20 times before it goes out, then I send it over to the attorneys, and we'll see. I always say we say cover our ears.
So, Dr. Mitchell, just to be super clear on what actually goes into that report, we get a document, but do you know what our office usually does?
Go to the very end and read the conclusions and recommendations.
Go to the last page. We're like, what are those recommendations?
100%, yes.
So what in your recommendations, what do you get to say to the court about what parents should and should not do and what the future looks like?
Right. So usually the main question that's asked of me is conservatorship, joint managing, sole managing conservatorship, possession and access.
Sure.
Those are really the main questions that's asked of me. So rights and duties are sometimes asked.
And could you kind of give some examples of a right or duty that is commonly contested?
Who gets to determine school?
Sure.
Who gets to determine maybe the pediatrician or the physicians, maybe some medical rights, certainly with COVID and everything that's gone on these last few years, medical rights have come up a lot more recently. Who can consent to psychological, psychiatric treatment? Those are the big ones. I know there's a few other geographic restrictions. That's another one. I don't know if that's in rights and duties, but geographic restriction is another one that comes up relatively frequently as well.
And when you get those recommendations out, sometimes does your report come out and then trial gets kicked down the curb and then you have to come back and revisit?
Yeah. You're talking like an update?
Yes.
On the psych eval? That does happen. That does happen from time to time. So obviously when I'm done, I send it to you guys. My understanding is how this process works is you sit with your client and the other party sits with the other attorney sits with their client. And then maybe you guys start talking, see if you can figure something out. If you can't, then maybe y'all go to mediation. And if you can't, that kind of keeps going down the road. I think there was one just a few weeks ago that I had that I think it was about a year from the time I submitted my report until it actually went to trial. Sometimes attorneys or even courts will ask me to update the custody evaluation. That can be tricky, but we can do it. We can do it quick. It can be tricky. I would say 90% of the time, 99% of the time, I don't have to. I've probably only updated a handful over the years. But that is something that can happen if trial is pushed, usually over a year.
Sure. In terms of your most memorable testimony, has there been a specific hearing or a specific client recently or in the past that stands out as someone who did not do the testimony right or did not present well within the child custody evaluation?
Yeah, there's always people I can think about. And for me, it's that it goes back to, are you defensive? Are you committed to the fact that you did no wrong and you're committed to the fact that the other side did no right ever? Those are the ones that even as you bring up this question, those are the ones that stand out in my mind, the people that are incapable of acknowledging personal shortcomings and incapable of saying, the other parent, he or she has some strengths.
Well, one of my favorite deposition questions to ask is, what is the best thing that the other parent does as a parent?
Yeah.
And I've literally gotten the answer, nothing. Or she gave them good genes, she's really pretty.
Yeah.
And that to a jury or to a judge does not come over well.
To anybody. It doesn't come over to anybody well. No, you're absolutely right. None of us is perfect. And to me, and if I can't admit personal fault, then for me, there is some pretty significant indication of some pretty severe psychopathology that would then impact parenting in the long term. We see this in our alienation cases, people just refusing to change, to do things differently. It's very, 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 very difficult.
So if someone left out of their history, oh, I forgot to tell you that I went to rehab, or, it comes out later in medical records that they had a severe diagnosis of bipolar and they're not treated, is that something that is going to impact the recommendations later on?
Certainly. It certainly could. I think what you're talking about is like, say I release report to January 1 and we come to trial September 1. Did this information come out in the meantime? That's
Yes.
kind of the question. Yeah. And there's even a little section in my report where I say, please understand that my recommendations are contingent upon the data that I obtained at the time. Certainly things may come up between the end of this report and a trial. And so certainly I would have to take that data in, and then certainly my recommendations could adjust just a bit if it was something that severe. Sure.
So I think the points that I get from you today are self-awareness,
Yes.
admitting your faults,
Yes.
being kind to the child custody evaluator or psychological testing forensic, and to just be a good human and live in the world like kindergarten rules. Be kind to others.
I think that's absolutely true. And I would say the other thing that I always want to say is your kid's going to need both of you. And sometimes there are parents that are really flawed and really have very serious psychiatric issues, substance use issues. The children still need some kind of connection with that parent. I can't be the kind of parent that badmouths the other one, even if they deserve it, and they may deserve it from time to time. Even if they deserve it, I can't be like that. And not for my sake, not for anything, but really for the sake of my kids' mental. If there's anything for my kids' mental health, if there's anything we know in the research, it's that conflict between parents is the worst predictor of kids' future mental health. So more than anything, you can be kind to me or not. It doesn't make me a difference, but be kind to your co-parent more than anything.
I love that takeaway, and I really appreciate it. Great ending to this fun conversation with you, and very informative.
Thank you so much.
So if you need to reach Dr. Blake Mitchell for counseling, for consultation as a client or an attorney, we will include his contact information in the notes of this. And if you need to reach our law office, you are always welcome to call us. And it's the law office of Natalie Gregg, and we've been practicing in Collin County, North Texas, surrounding counties for the past 15 years. Thank you for joining us today.